Welcome to Module 6. Module 6 is only going to cover one chapter, but it's going to be a really important one. In Chapter 10, you're going to learn about the third declension. And so in the first 5 modules, we've explored the first and second declensional paradigms, but in this module, we're going to look at the third declension. Now, we're not going to learn a lot of words. There aren't a lot of words that follow the third declension, but words like charis, which means grace, arpistis, which means faith, pater, which means father, these are going to follow the third declensional pattern. And it's going to be really important for you to be able to recognize the form so that you can see how these words function in the sentence, whether it's the subject or the direct object. Now, some good news about the third declension, about chapter 10 in general, is that there's no new grammar. And so you guys have already learned about nominatives, genitives, datives, and accusatives and how they function in the sentence. So there's nothing new here in chapter 10. It's only memorization. And so this is a memorization heavy chapter and a memorization heavy module. And so you're going to have to learn that, do a lot of rote memorization for the third declension. But the second piece of good news about the third declension is that there's no fourth declension. And so there's only 3 declensions in Greek. And you guys, as soon as you have the third declension under your belt, you've got them all. Now, when we look forward to NT102, we're going to see that the participle is going to follow the first and second declension, but also the third declension. So by putting in the time now to learn the third declension, you're actually helping yourself as when we look forward and get to NT102 and start thinking about the participle. Now, the main characteristic of the third declension is that the noun stem or the adjective stem is going to end with a consonant instead of a vowel. And so like the first declension, the stem ends in an A vowel, so either an alpha or an eta. And then the second declension is the noun stem ends in an omicron. Now the problem with the third declension is that in Greek, when we have 2 consonants coming together, they contract. And so the third declension nouns are going to contract into 2 places in the paradigm. The first place is going to be our nominative singular form, and then the second place is going to be our dative plural form. So nominative singular, dative plural, that's where we're going to see the contractions. And so to write out the paradigm, you really need 2 things. The first thing that you need is the budak. And so our third declension budak is going to be sasia es onsias. Make sure that you know that before you go into the quiz. The budak for the third declension is going to be sasia es onsias. This budak is a made-up Greek word, which is our endings for the third declension. So the nominative singular, the ending is going to be sigma. The genitive is going to be omicron sigma. The dative is going to be iota, and the accusative is going to be alpha. And then for the plural, our nominative is going to be epsilon sigma. The genitive plural is going to be omicron nu. And our dative plural is going to be sigma iota. And then our accusative singular is going to be alpha sigma. So out of our endings, sasia es ansias, if you go back through that paradigm or that pattern, you'll see that every ending actually has a vowel before it, except for our nominative singular and dative plural. They have that sigma. And so when the sigma comes up against another vowel, it's going to contract. The second thing that you need for the paradigm is the noun stem. Now, the difficulty with the noun stem is that the lexical form contracts. So you have to pop the hood and look under to see what the noun stem is. And so I recommend that you actually look at the genitive to get to the noun stem. And so when we learned the first and second declensional pattern, it felt very repetitive and predictable to learn the genitive. But with the third declension, it's absolutely crucial that you know the genitive form because you gotta know the noun stem to write out the paradigm. So if you have these 2 things, our budak, sasia es onsias, and the noun stem, you can write out the paradigm. And so for example, I would write out the noun stem sark for our pattern word sarks. I would write that out 8 times, And then I would write out our endings sasia as ansias. And then you know where the consonants are going to contract in that nominative singular form, sarx. And so the kappa against the sigma is going to turn to C. And then in the dative plural, same way, we're going to get sarxi. And so sarx with the xi, and then sarkas, sarki, sarka, sarks, sarkon, sarxi with a xi, and then sarkas. And so pretty straightforward once you know what you're looking for with the third declension. That budak, sasiat, es oncias, and then the stem. And so for sarx, the stem is actually sark. And so that's another tricky thing about the third declension, because when we say the stem, you're actually thinking that the word is going to be shorter, but sometimes that contracted form is shorter than the stem. And so for example, anama, the stem is actually anamat. But what happens is that sigma comes against the tau, and both the tau and the sigma drop, and what we have is anama. And so just a few comments about the third declension pattern. First, the paradigms for the neuter nouns will form the same way, but with neuter nouns, the nominative and the accusative are going to be identical. And so for the singular form, it's the accusative singular is going to be identical to the lexical form. And then for the plural, all neuter nouns are going to end in an alpha. And so that nominative plural form is going to be anamata, and then the accusative plural form is going to be identical, anamata. And so just a quick note for our neuter nouns, those neuter noun rules that Malins gives us in the textbook are going to apply to the third declension. Second, you're going to learn a few third declension adjectives. And so you'll find either 3-1-3 adjectives like pas, and this is third declension, first declension, third declension. So when pas modifies either a masculine or neuter noun, we're going to use the third declension. But when it modifies a feminine noun, it's going to follow the first declension. So 3-1-3. And then there's one adjective, tis, which is going to follow a 3-3 pattern. Our 3-3 pattern is a basic third declension, two termination pattern, just like ionios. Ionios is a 2-2 adjective, tis is a 3-3 pattern. And so basically, the masculine and feminine forms are going to be identical, and they're going to follow the third declensional pattern. There aren't many adjectives that follow the 3-1-3 or the 3-3 pattern, but the ones that do follow this pattern are going to occur quite a bit. And so pas, which means each or every, artis, which means someone or who. Going to see this quite a bit in the Greek New Testament. The third comment I would say about the third declension is that all bets are off for the gender of third declension nouns. And so with the first and second declension, you could distinguish between gender. And so second declension nouns are either going to be masculine or neuter. And you can just look at the lexical form. Masculine nouns had that omicron sigma like logos. Neuter nouns had that omicron nu like ergon. First declension nouns were mostly feminine. And so for the first and second declension nouns, gender was fairly easy to distinguish. But with the third declension, you really have to pay attention and memorize the article when we give you a new vocabulary word. That article is going to determine the gender, and so you have to memorize the gender of each nouns. There's some variation to the third declension, and so I just want to point out the Module 6 memorization requirements. And so there we give you a few nouns and adjectives that we want you to memorize. We're going to ask these on quizzes and exams, or some variation of these words. And so sarx, that's going to be your pattern third declension noun. So you got to know sarx. And then anama is going to follow, several mat nouns are going to follow anama. So another important third declension noun, pneuma, is going to follow those mat nouns. And so the stem, just like anama, the stem is anamat. The stem for pneuma is pneumat. And so sarx and anima in chapter 10, and then the adjectives pas and haste, and then I would add tis from chapter 10. And then even though we're not getting into chapter 11, two paradigms we really want you to we want you to memorize is charis and pistis, and you'll find those in chapter 11. So don't worry about getting into the material for chapter 11. Just go look at those paradigms that Mounts gives you there. That's it for chapter 10 and module 6. I realize that is a ton to memorize from this chapter. But the next module we're going to see deals with pronouns. And we're going to see that pronouns are pretty straightforward. The paradigms are generally going to follow that 2-1-2 declensional pattern. And so in good fashion, Mounts is going to kind of ratchet up the memorization, and then the next few chapters he's going to ratchet it back down. And so that's it for chapter 10 and module 6. If you guys have any questions about the third declension, don't hesitate to contact me.